Today, we're talking about the latest trade rumors around the Chicago Bulls. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Mazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about the latest trade rumors around the Chicago Bulls, as we're going to be looking at two teams that have been linked to the Bulls. The first one being the New Orleans Pelicans, the other being the Minnesota Timberwolves. And so we're going to start with the latest trade rumors around the Pelicans and the Bulls. And so if you have not got a chance to see this article was published on the Chicago Sun-Times website, and this is written by Joe Cowley, and this is what he had to say about the Bulls and the Pelicans. And so picking it up in paragraph number 2, it says that the Sun-Times confirmed a report that the Bulls have had ongoing talks with the Pelicans about players such as forward Zion Williamson and center Yves Missi. While the chatter around Williamson has quieted on the Pelicans end, there has been momentum around Missi. The question is, at what cost? Now, Joe Cowley does go on to say in this article that the Pelicans would be looking for a 2026 unprotected first-round pick. He also says that the Pelicans would want to move off of Jordan Poole and that bad contract. And he mentions the fact that with Yves Missi, he has lost minutes since his rookie season. And he's saying that, look, the Pelicans certainly would be willing to trade him, but they're not just going to give him away. And then the last part that he mentions with the Bulls and the Pelicans is this. He says that the Pelicans would have to have a tank mentality and put together Williamson and Missi for a package of players on expiring contracts, such as center Nikola Vucevic, guard Coby White, and forward Jalen Smith. And all indications now are that Williamson, headaches, injuries, and all, is off the table. All right, so that is just, talking about, hey, getting to a deal and just really the possibility and just the fact that, look, the Pelicans would have to seriously be looking to tank to move off of both of these players. And that, look, all indications are that Williamson is off the table. And so that leads me to the next part here, which is the buy or sell on this. And so I want to buy the fact that it makes sense for the Bulls to trade for Yves Missi. I could see what they're trying to do if they're trading for Zion Williamson as well. But I think that this is going to be a tough buy in the sense that if the Pelicans are looking for an unprotected 2026 first round pick, I think that that's something that I'm not sure that the Bulls would be willing to do. I also don't think that the Bulls are in position to give up a first round pick, especially if it's just for Yves Missi. And so because of that, I think that makes the possibility of this deal getting done very tough. And then on top of that, he mentions that Jordan Poole, right? And Jordan Poole in the bad contract. Look, Jordan Poole at this point in time of this current podcast recording, 31.8 million. And it says for 2 seasons there with Jordan Poole. And so I don't think that the Bulls would necessarily be willing to take on some bad money in a deal too as well, because we've talked about that before. And so because of that, it makes it a tough buy on this. But I will say from a fit standpoint, if you're looking for Yves Missi, I could understand that. With Zion Williamson, I've already talked about that, which I'll talk about that some more in a moment. So I'm not necessarily sold on that. But with Yves Missi, I could see that. And I think that, with this report, it really confirms what we've been, hearing, just going back to something that was mentioned here in the past. And so if you want to read about this, you can head over to sportsillustrated.com. This is written by Elias Schuster. And within this is something that we've talked about a couple videos back, and this was initially put out there by Brett Siegel of ClutchPoints, but talking about the fact that, the Bulls could possibly be looking to go ahead and get Zion on a buy low situation here. And so, just referring to what was said here, it says that, I've heard that there has been some smoke there about Chicago scouting the Pelicans in recent weeks, and Zion would be the ideal buy low candidate for a team like the Bulls, who have a lot of expiring contracts. It's just something to keep an eye on. I think there's a little bit of smoke there, and we'll see where this goes. And so that was Brett Siegel. And so, Joe Cowley confirming that, and also too, when he says that Zion is off the table, I think that this is something that is not new as well, because just kind of going and doing some more digging here, I did get a chance to see something here from Chris Haynes, who reports on the NBA. And he said that the New Orleans Pelicans are telling front offices that Zion Williamson, along with multiple other young players, will remain with the Pelicans through February 5th. The declaration has apparently disappointed teams and comes with still 27 days to go until the trade deadline. And so, that was a little further back. And so, again, confirming that the Pelicans would not be interested in moving off of Zion. But, with the Yves Missi situation, I think that this is something that's very much in play. And we had seen this with the Dallas Hoops Journal and talking about the Bulls and the Pacers. And I could see that making sense for both teams, especially the Pacers, now that they don't have Miles Turner and looking for another center. I think that Yves Missi makes, a ton of sense there. And also, too, with the Bulls, he makes a ton of sense as well. And for me, I'm more in on the Yves Missi deal. I think that with Yves Missi, you're looking at a player that was all rookie second team in his first year, 9.1 points, 8.2 rebounds, the 1.3 blocks. He started in 67 games, which is huge for me, because you're talking about a player that is durable and that is out there. And that's the best availability, is being out there. And so I love that about him. And then on top of that, you're talking about a player that's on the rookie scale contract. And we talked about this. And so that gives the Bulls, I think, a ton of flexibility here, because that means that when he does get to the end of the contract, he's going to get into restricted free agency. And that means that, look, you can go ahead and you can match the offer or whatever you want to do there. And so you're not just going to lose him. But as far as just what, Yves Missi brings to the team, you're talking about defense at the rim. I think he's a very mobile big, a player that can step out there in the pick and rolls and things like that. And I think if it's a center that's going to shoot threes, he can get out there and guard that. And you're talking about a lob threat. That would be perfect with Josh Giddey. I think any of these guards here, if you're to keep everybody, and so, Ayo, Coby, Trey Jones, whoever, he fits just fine with that. I think that he would fit fine with Manis Buzelis as well. And so, and I also think that he works with Jalen Smith. Like, I don't think that any of those bigs would, get in the way of each other there as far as the front court. And so I like that possibility, and so for me, I'm more so in on the Yves Missi. I'm not necessarily sold on giving up an unprotected 2026 first round pick. If they're looking at a protected one, the one that they have there with the Portland Trailblazers, okay, let's talk about that. And for me, I'm going to take on the bad money, but that means that the Pelicans would also need to be giving me something as well. And so that means that's where, and we've talked about this before, if you're going to take on bad money, you need to be getting some type of pick back as well. And so, that's where I'm at with that. And with Zion, look, great talent. The issue with Zion is he just doesn't stay healthy enough for me. That's why, I would really be on the fence moving a first round pick for him, because you just really wouldn't be able to get, I think, the max out of that deal, because, there's no guarantee with what he is going to do as far as staying on the floor. And then also too, I think with Zion, I wonder what happens once you get to a point in time where you need him to expand the game, because I think at this point in time, he's terrific at attacking the rim and everything else and getting the dunks and stuff like that. But what happens when teams start to load up there, and force him to shoot jump shots? Because that is something that he's not, very good at. I know he's a point forward and everything else. And so I think that you see that there is somewhat the fit there, but I think that once teams adjust, it's going to be tough. But, I understand, when you're taking a look at a player that has averaged 24.4 points, in his career. I believe he's made a couple all-star teams and everything else. The rebounds, his best effort has been 7.2 in a season. He's averaging 6.5 for his career. But again, talking about him expanding his game as a three-point shooter, I think the season before, 23.1%. His best was his rookie season at 42.9. And so you just really haven't seen that. Career best, 31.7. And so, at some point in time, I think he's going to have to do something else. But, with Zion Williamson, I'm out on that, even though, again, he's a great talent. And you just see what he can do as far as bringing the basketball up and doing things like this. And I get everything like that, but I am out on giving up draft capital for a player that has played in less than 50% of his games. I think 49% or something like that. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. Would you go ahead and make the trade for Yves Missi? Are you buying or selling that the Bulls are going to get something done? Do you think that they would give up the unprotected 2026 first round pick, for Yves Missi? And again, there are several sources that have confirmed that the Pelicans are not interested in moving Zion Williamson. All right, so next, I want to go ahead and jump into the latest trade buzz here around Coby White. And so, there's a couple different places where I have seen this. And so just going back to this first piece that we took a look at here with Joe Cowley, after the Pelicans stuff, at the bottom, there's a couple points here about the Minnesota Timberwolves and just talking about the fact that the Timberwolves could be another trade partner for the Bulls to really keep an eye on. He does say that the Sun Times reported last month that the teams talked about a deal for Coby White. The Timberwolves also have inquired about Dosunmu and Trey Jones too, and just really talking about the fact that look, and I think that this is something that's well documented, that the Minnesota Timberwolves are looking to get somebody over there with Anthony Edwards, and they want to get a point guard. All right. And so also too, in ClutchPoints as well, Coby White was mentioned as a perfect landing spot for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And so within this piece, it talks about the fact that, maybe what it would take to get it done. Mike Conley, the fact that you're looking at a salary filler there. Rob Dillingham, talking about him, a young player that just really hasn't cracked the rotation over there with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And just the fact that, again, you're looking at a player in Coby White that can score the basketball at a high clip. And so just looking at Coby's numbers, 18.1 points per game right now, 4.5 assists, at shooting at 78.3% from the free throw line and 33.8% from three. I think that that's going to climb a bit more now that he's finally finding his rhythm here, and 45.3% from the field. And so the Timberwolves would certainly want to take that on. The question is, would this happen? And so, look, I am also buying the fact that this is something that could certainly happen here. With these deals, I haven't seen anything that suggests that the Timberwolves would be looking for picks. And so, if you're talking about player swaps and stuff like that, I think that this certainly would have to be in play, especially since the Bulls, do all these 1-for-1 swaps, or they've done 1-for-1 swaps. And so, it just seems to be something that the Bulls would certainly do. It's just the question of, do you believe in a Rob Dillingham? Like, do you believe that, a player that has come into the league, was a lottery pick, he has not found his way with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that, look, the team has been good. Like, the Minnesota Timberwolves have been good. And at this point in time, perhaps you look at that situation and you say, look, they just didn't have the time to go ahead and throw him out there to develop him. But the Bulls, if they were trading for him, I would get it and everything else, but I would just wonder what that fit is going to look like, alongside of Josh Giddey, and then the other guards that you do keep. And so that's where I'm at with that. I don't mind Mike Conley coming over. Look, it's an expiring contract and everything else. And I think certainly, when you're talking about a veteran presence, I don't mind Mike Conley there. For me, I think another player that I would be a little bit more interested in would have to be Terrence Shannon Jr. Like, I'm more interested in him than I am in Rob Dillingham. Like, I think I've seen more from Terrence Shannon Jr. And like, he's another player that I'm saying, okay, I'm good with that. I would definitely want to check out him as well. And so, those are players that I'm saying, all right, I'm going to take a chance on them more so than I would say a Rob Dillingham. I could see this happening. But again, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. Do you think that the Chicago Bulls would make a deal here for the Minnesota Timberwolves, for either of these young players that I have mentioned? Again, Coby White has been on a heater lately. He just got done kind of lighting up the Los Angeles Clippers. He also got done lighting up the Brooklyn Nets as well. And so certainly finding his rhythm right now. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking with this latest trade noise. Would you make a deal here, moving Coby White or any of these guards for Terrence Shannon Jr., Rob Dillingham, or again, Behringer, or also too going back to that deal with the Pelicans? Like, would you be interested here in Yves Missi if he's the only one on the table? And so, as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.